there is a particular kind of rejection that doesn't look like rejection at all. She stays close, watches you differently, becomes softer when you're alone together, finds reasons to remain near you, and yet the moment the relationship could become real, something inside her pulls the emergency brake. It is confusing because her behavior keeps telling you there is something there, while her decisions keep telling you to stop. And eventually, you start wondering whether you imagined every moment between you. But sometimes the most painful truth is not that she doesn't want you. It is that she wants you enough to become afraid of what saying yes would actually mean. Because wanting someone and feeling safe enough to choose them are not the same psychological experience. Desire moves towards something. Fear moves away from consequences. And when both exist inside the same person, you get the kind of woman who can spend an entire evening emotionally close to a man and then become distant the moment she senses that he has understood what is happening between them. She isn't necessarily playing a game. She may be fighting a private battle between the part of her that wants intimacy and the part of her that has learned to associate intimacy with danger. That is why her hesitation can feel so personal. You see the warmth, the attention, the moments when her guard disappears, and naturally you assume that if she feels something, eventually she will simply surrender to it. But emotions don't work that cleanly. Someone can genuinely crave closeness while simultaneously fearing the vulnerability that closeness demands. She can imagine being with you and feel excited, then imagine what being with you would require from her and suddenly feel exposed. The problem isn't always the feeling itself. Sometimes the feeling is exactly what scares her. What makes this even more confusing is that fear rarely announces itself as fear. It often disguises itself as uncertainty. She may suddenly become overly analytical about things that never seemed important before. She may focus on differences, complications, timing, circumstances, or reasons why it wouldn't work. Those reasons can be real, but sometimes they become psychological shields that allow her to avoid confronting a much more uncomfortable possibility. If she says yes, she can no longer pretend that she doesn't care. And caring creates something she may have spent years avoiding, the possibility of loss. Before she chooses you, she can protect herself with ambiguity. She can tell herself that nothing serious has happened, that she isn't attached, that she could walk away whenever she wants. But the moment she admits that she wants you, the emotional balance changes. Now there is something valuable enough to lose. For someone who has learned to protect themselves through emotional distance, that realization can feel less like romance and more like standing at the edge of a cliff. This is why some women become more hesitant when the connection becomes stronger. From the outside, it seems irrational. If she didn't care, why would she become nervous when things deepen? Why would she retreat precisely when the attraction becomes undeniable? Because emotional closeness removes the protective distance that allowed her to feel in control. She may have been comfortable wanting you when the possibility remained theoretical. But when she realizes you could actually become important to her, the fantasy becomes a risk. And there is another layer that makes this even more painful. Sometimes she isn't afraid of you at all. She is afraid of who she becomes around you. Around the right person, carefully constructed emotional defenses can become harder to maintain. The woman who normally knows how to remain composed may suddenly find herself caring about what you think, noticing your absence, becoming jealous of possibilities she doesn't want to admit bother her, or feeling unusually vulnerable when you become emotionally distant. She doesn't recognize herself in those moments, and when people don't understand their own emotional reactions, they often try to regain control by creating distance. That distance can make the man believe he did something wrong. He begins replaying every interaction, searching for the exact moment he lost her interest. But sometimes nothing was lost. The opposite happened. Something became too real. The emotional connection crossed an invisible threshold where she could no longer experience it without confronting what it meant. This is where the contradiction becomes almost cruel. She may want reassurance but resist receiving it. She may want closeness but become uncomfortable when closeness is offered. She may want to know that you care while simultaneously fearing what your care could eventually demand from her. She can feel safer imagining that you want her than actually allowing herself to be loved by you, because being desired from a distance preserves control. Being loved up close requires trust. And trust is where many hidden fears finally reveal themselves. Because saying yes to someone is never only saying yes to that person. Psychologically, it can feel like saying yes to everything that could happen afterward. Yes to being known. Yes to being disappointed. Yes to becoming attached. Yes to having someone discover the parts of you that are easier to hide when you're alone. Yes to the possibility that the person you finally allow close enough to hurt you might actually hurt you. That is why a woman can stand directly in front of something she genuinely wants and still hesitate. The human mind doesn't always choose what feels best. It often chooses what feels familiar and controllable. If emotional distance has always protected her, intimacy can feel strangely threatening even when the person offering it feels safe. And sometimes the fear comes from the opposite direction entirely. She may have been hurt before, but she doesn't necessarily need a dramatic history to become afraid of love. Sometimes it comes from watching relationships collapse around her. Sometimes it comes from growing up believing that needing someone makes you weak. Sometimes she simply spent so long becoming emotionally self-sufficient that depending on another person now feels like surrendering part of herself. So when you see her pull away, the easiest explanation is that she doesn't want you enough. It is clean. It gives you an answer. But human behavior is rarely that clean. Sometimes the person who feels the most is the person who becomes the most frightened by what they feel. You can see it in the moments she almost says something and then changes direction. In the way she allows herself to be emotionally open until she suddenly realizes how much she has revealed. In the way she can look completely comfortable beside you until the atmosphere becomes intimate enough that she remembers what is at stake. Her withdrawal isn't always the disappearance of attraction. Sometimes it is the return of her defenses. And the tragedy is that both people can misinterpret each other at exactly the same time. She thinks her fear is obvious, while you interpret it as disinterest. You think your patience is obvious, while she interprets your uncertainty as a sign that eventually you will leave. She retreats to protect herself. You retreat because you believe she doesn't want you. She sees your distance and becomes even more convinced that opening up was a mistake. Neither person realizes that the other is responding to fear rather than lack of feeling. This is how something real can die without either person ever deciding they wanted it to end. But there is something even darker about her hesitation. Sometimes she is not only afraid that you will hurt her. She is afraid that you won't. Because if you are genuinely different from what she expected, then she has to reconsider the emotional defenses she built around herself. It is easier to maintain a belief that love is dangerous when everyone confirms it. A safe person creates a much more complicated problem. Now she has to decide whether she is willing to become vulnerable despite having no guarantee. And there is never a guarantee. That may be the part she is fighting hardest to accept. She wants the feeling without the risk. She wants to know what being close to you feels like without having to admit that she could lose you. She wants certainty before making a decision that can only ever be made with uncertainty. And the more meaningful you become, the more impossible that demand becomes. Because love doesn't become frightening when nothing is at stake. It becomes frightening when something finally is. So if you've ever watched someone move toward you emotionally and then suddenly pull back, don't assume the contradiction means the feeling was fake. Sometimes the contradiction is the evidence that two powerful forces are colliding inside her, the desire to be chosen and the fear of being exposed, the hunger for intimacy and the instinct to protect herself from it. But there is a haunting truth hidden inside the contradiction. Wanting you does not automatically mean she can choose you. A person can love the idea of opening the door and still be terrified of what happens when someone walks through it. She can stand inches away from the relationship she secretly wants and still convince herself that stepping backward is safer. And from where you stand, all you can see is the distance. You don't see the argument happening inside her. You don't see the version of herself that imagines being with you. You don't see the version that imagines losing you. You only see the hesitation. And perhaps that is what makes this kind of connection so painful. Sometimes the person standing in front of you isn't saying no because she feels nothing. She is saying no because saying yes would make the feeling real enough to hurt. And there are moments when two people can want each other at the exact same time, standing on opposite sides of the same invisible wall, both waiting for the other person to make the fear disappear. But fear doesn't disappear because someone is wanted. Eventually, one of them has to decide whether the possibility of love is worth the possibility of loss. And sometimes she realizes it only after the moment has passed, when she finally understands that the distance she created to protect her heart also created the exact emptiness she was afraid of feeling. Because the cruelest part was never that she didn't want him. It was that she did. She just wasn't ready for what wanting him would cost her.